Most balance changes in Clash of Clans involve slightly tweaking the numbers of something to make it less broken, right? It rarely ever involves nuking its stats by a large amount, but as you know, it does happen. In today's video, we're focusing on just that. This isn't about the worst nerfs or nerfs that killed something. We will simply be looking at the biggest nerfs, looking at the raw numbers and looking for the most drastic drops. Starting with the Bat spell. Released in December 2018, right off the bat, it was pretty good. I mean, that is a huge understatement because just 2 days after release, it received its first nerf. The problem with the bat spell was that it was just spawning too many bats. It started spawning 15 at level 1 and went all the way to 27 at max level. And if you've used bat spells before, you know you don't just bring one of them. Sometimes your whole spell factory is just bat spells. So you had hundreds of bats, nearly 250 in some cases. But I don't need to explain how busted that many bats were. Look at this gameplay of someone taking out half the base with 7 bat spells in a rage. I mean, what in the world was the Clash team thinking? They probably didn't think that people would train a whole army of bats, you know? Anyways, after the 2 back-to-back nerfs that it received that December and January, the bat spell ended up spawning an average of 41% less bats. And that is just the average. At some levels, it was cut by over half. And it's crazy because the bat spell wasn't bad after, you know? To this day, it's still very effective. Just goes to show how busted it was before. Battle Ram. Not the temporary one, but the clan capital version. The battle ram wasn't necessarily that OP. I mean, that initial hit with the ram did hit pretty hard and it dealt splash damage, so a bit strong, yes. But it wasn't all that, especially by itself. Instead, it was incredibly busted when paired with the graveyard, because as those barbarians spawned and absorbed damage, the graveyard would spawn skeletons and everything would overwhelm defenses. There were just too many troops for them to handle. Because of the graveyard spam strategy though, the battle ram would get some pretty heavy nerfs. Its HP was reduced by an average of 9% and its damage by 50%. Though its damage against walls was doubled, this didn't really matter as it could already one-shot walls before. This change was only so that it can one-shot walls after the nerf. The graveyard was nerfed as well, but it wasn't terrible. Its skeletons were reduced by an average of 27%. Still bad, but compared to everything else on this video, yeah, not terrible at all. I think the battle ram received the worst of these two, but it was arguably necessary, especially for only 5 housing space that it required. Rage Spell Tower. Yes, just the rage on the spell tower, because even though the other 2 options were nerfed slightly, they weren't nothing compared to how hard the rage spell got slapped into another dimension. The main problem with the rage spell tower was that it was raging defenses by too much and too often. Every 50 seconds, it would drop a rage that buffed defenses by 100%. It was bananas. And from its release in 2022 all the way till the end of 2023, this was basically the default option. Why upgrade the spell tower and unlock the other useless spells, you know? But it all eventually came to an end. After 2 consecutive nerfs in mid to late 2023, the Rage Spell Tower ended up with a range of 1 tile less, a cooldown that took 40% longer, and a 40% reduction in its damage buff. The Rage Spell Tower was nerfed pretty dang hard. Even that 1 tile decrease, which sounds insignificant, was pretty devastating to many base designs. But like many things in this video, this was absolutely necessary. In the World Finals that year, 88% of bases had double rage towers. The nerfs made the other 2 options pretty decent, which is the way it should have been in the first place. Druid. Ah yes, one of the most forgotten troops in the game. That troop you saw everywhere when released, and then you didn't. Like a Clash Royale evolution after 3 months. The Druid started out strong after its release in June 2024. People would throw it in any army and then notice that troops and heroes were surviving way longer. If it was that easy, why wouldn't you? This was thanks to the Druid's unique mechanics over the healer, like being able to simultaneously target air and ground, and its heals being able to bounce between targets. But most importantly, the amount it was healing was insane. At 140 HP per second at max level, removal, it basically made anything it was healing invincible for 30 seconds before turning into a bear, which was also pretty good. It had the same HP as an ice golem and hit like a miner. For a few months, the Druid was a beast of a support troop. It made any average army a face roll, but that would ultimately come to an end in October of 2024. Its number of targets would be reduced from 5 to 4, its evolve time from 30 seconds to 25, its healing output reduced by a staggering 42%, and the bear's HP was cut in half. What did the bear do anyway, you know? The Druid had been nerfed to the ground. Did it make the Druids useless? No, many still use it, including myself from time to time. I don't notice it, but it's in my army. But its use cases are now very niche. You know, there's almost always going to be a better option, so you may as well not even bother. Currently, it is just an okay troop. Giga Tesla. Yes, the Town Hall 12 weapon. They did it so dirty, man. It's weak sauce compared to its 2018 version. There was nothing wrong with the Giga Tesla. It wasn't OP or anything. They had already nerfed it in 2023. But in 2024, they decided to nerf a whole lot of defenses in an attempt to make the lower Town Halls even weaker. There's babies playing down there. We gotta make it easier. No, I'm playing. But seriously, they were trying to make the game way easier, and the Giga Tesla just happened to get caught in that crossfire. This specific nerf would end up reducing its damage at all levels by an average of 14%, and the Giga Bomb's damage was cut in half. Most Town Hall weapons received nerfs as well, but the Giga Tesla received the harshest of them all. And that nerf to the bomb was especially devastating. Root Rider. The Root Rider's case has been studied quite a bit. What started out as a no-brainer spam troop would ultimately become a no-brain spam troop. Yeah, nothing changed. Jimmy Neutron's hair was released in December 2023, and right off the bat, it was one heck of a troop. Sliced through walls like butter, and no matter how hard it hit defenses, it would still be slapping the crap out of everything. By the end of the attack, it was almost like you could go attack another base with the amount of Root Riders that were still around. It was pretty clear that the Root Riders were simply too much of a meat shield and dealt too much damage, and unless they were gonna increase their housing space, they had to nerf the stats. Between a 4-month period in 2024, the Root Rider received 3 consecutive nerfs. In the end, her HP was reduced by 16% and her damage by 54%. Hot diggity dog. However, these nerfs weren't as devastating to the Root Rider as other nerfs in this video because of the simple fact that she isn't the damage dealer in most armies. She's just there as a meat shield and breaks walls open, you know, that's what she does. And even to this day, she still excels at doing those things. Inferno Tower. We can't talk about the biggest nerfs in Clash history without mentioning what they did to my boy Inferni. From the moment it was introduced, the Inferno Tower was pretty strong, and it got even stronger when they gave it the ability to block healing effects in December 2018. In fact, this was one of the main reasons why the Town Hall 10 meta was so impossible. You know, get your healers and heal spells out of here. That ain't gonna work around here, buddy. You gotta learn how to attack for real, for real. But this difficulty was actually hurting the game, and Supercell wanted to appeal to casuals more. So they nerfed the Inferno out of the tower. There's not really a percent here, as the nerf wasn't to its stats, but the removal of that healing block ability. If we could measure this in numbers somehow, I'd estimate that the Inferno Tower lost between 30 to 50% of its effectiveness, but this is just a theoretical number. There's no real way to measure this. This would ultimately lead to the higher Town Halls being significantly easier, which would kickstart a series of buffs to the Inferno and other defenses and traps. Lavaloon. Ah yes, the best spammable troop in Clash history, truly deserves to be in the Spam and Forget Hall of Fame. And even after a quote-unquote big nerf back in 2023 and a small one in 2024, it remained pretty strong. The Lavaloon was simply too good because it had too much HP, it dealt crazy damage even to buildings it wasn't even targeting, and all of those lava pups were insane. And the cherry on top, it was simply too easy to use. I mean, and people talk about attacking blindfolded as a joke all the time, but you could actually do it with the Lavaloon. However, when it returned in 2025, players noticed something different about it. The most insane housing space increase of all time goes to the Lavaloon, which went up by 52%, specifically from 23 to 35. You could previously train 13 of these, but after this, only 9. Supercell had killed the Lavaloon. Just kidding, they were still the same brain dead attack strategy, just a tad bit less effective. Even though the numbers show that this was a huge increase, bringing 4 of them less wasn't that terrible. Clock Tower. The Clock Tower was present at the time the builder base came out in May 2017. And back then it was seen as one of the best things about the builder base, considering that all the upgrades took forever. So if you wanted to significantly speed up your progress, logging on a couple times a day was well worth your time. However, the Clock Tower was apparently giving players too much value. Only a month later, players woke up to some pretty gnarly balance changes that would upset many. The speed increase was reduced from 10x to 8x. And its duration was cut by 50%. There was a slight buff to its cooldown, however, considering the other 2 changes, it really didn't make a difference. Nobody cared about that small buff, just meant you had to get on every 7 hours now. The Clock Tower had essentially lost over half of its effectiveness overnight, and this would become one of the most controversial topics of the year. Years later, the Clock Tower stats were reworked entirely, but it would never return to its former glory. Witch. Another troop that was incredibly busted in its heyday. The Witch is one of those troops that was aggressively nerfed at one point, but it wasn't enough, and it remained that way for a while, and for 2 years they just let it go crazy. What made the Witch so OP in the first place though is that the skeletons she spawned would basically shield for her. You know, they'd go out and activate traps and distract defenses, and she could stand back and deal most of the heavy damage. This was especially effective when paired with golems, as this meant the Witch could chill in the back and spawn skeletons the entire attack. However, in March 2016, this nearly 3-year streak would come to an end. They straight up removed the skeleton's ability to activate traps, which was largely the reason she was good and usable, if I'm being honest. And just as everyone had predicted, they were absolutely terrible after. Now, like the Inferno Tower, we can't put this in real numbers, but I'd assume this reduced her effectiveness between 40 and 60%. And that number is based on how much she was buffed that very same year. Definitely one of the most brutal nerfs in Clash history. But yeah, those are the biggest nerfs in Clash history. I tried to rank these by numbers, but as you can see, many of them had 1 stat change only, some had 3, and others didn't even have any at all. So it was kind of challenging to sort them. Anyway, with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed, but hey, before you go, YouTube thinks you'll like this next video, so why don't you check it out? As always, have a gaming out. Peace!